Good afternoon. Welcome to the TheoTrade afternoon video. I am Blake Young. Today is October 10th, 2024, and we're going to talk about inflation has pushed me back to the basics. Now, when I talk about back to the basics, I mean basic material. Inflation is rising, and the fact is the Fed cut rates when they shouldn't have, which is going to only exacerbate the inflation problem. As you can see from the Bureau of Labor and Statistics, the people that report the CPI, inflation rose in September, specifically shelter and food. Now, I expected to see inflation rise because of the Fed rate cut and because of rising oil costs. Rising oil costs would certainly add to inflation, but we saw it in shelter and food. That means we have it shelter, food, and energy, which are the core of the core. Now, if we take out the core, you can see it even says that we still had a 0.3% increase in September. So even removing food, energy, housing, we are still seeing a rise in inflation. So inflation is hot. The shelter is represented by rent equivalent, but we are still seeing inflation not only stay high, but starting to climb again. And we can certainly see that over here if we look at the CPI data here. 0.3 higher than expected, 0.2 higher than expected on the year over year, 2.4% instead of 2.3, which is what we had forecasted, and this is turning back up from expectations. As we're pushing this, we're pushing for a higher inflation data. We're also seeing the ECB is expecting rate cuts. Well, that should strengthen the dollar if against the euro, but the dollar should also be weakening against inflation. If the dollar is weakening against inflation but strengthening against the euro, it still might be a good place to park money in the US dollar, but what should benefit even more are core materials, basic materials, metals mining, and the things that we use every single day. So I'm looking at the basics, and that would be XLB. Now, XLB, as you can see, has created a lovely little bull flag. It went from 89 up to 97, pulled back, gave us a breakout yesterday, a bullish breakout, and today is a little bit of follow through with higher highs, higher lows. I've talked a lot about volume, and as volume is set up, we're looking at this volume breakout and this pullback. This breakout right through here on the higher highs, higher lows, the breakout is more of a bounce. I'm not worried about it breaking through a resistance area. This is a bounce, and so on bounces, I'm okay with the average volume, which is what it was. If it was breaking through the record highs, like back through here, I would want to see higher volume on the breakout. Right here, I just need average volume, and that's what we got. So rather than going into basic materials and staying with XLB as a broad indicator, let's look at some of the stocks inside of XLB and the basic materials sector. And that would include things like Freeport-McMoRan, Newmont Mining, Mosaic, and even things like DuPont and Dow. But let's look primarily at these three, FCX, NEM, MOS, and we'll probably even look at Southern Copper. And then something that isn't on this list, but should be. So let's take a look. Starting out with FCX. FCX gave us a lovely bullish move, pulled back inside the oversold area of the weekly monkey bars, broke out and hit the 50%. Because it's at the 50% on next to zero volume, I'm not sure I want to chase FCX yet, but it's still on my list as a potential trade. Newmont looks better though, because Newmont, as you look here, we actually got the breakout of a bull flagish type of pattern, or at least a bounce off of the support level, a follow through on about average volume, and I'm looking for this to return swing high up to 56. Now, if we had higher volume, I would assume that we're going to rise at this pace. So right now, 53 to 56, there's a $3 move, about an 8% opportunity in Newmont. If we have any acceleration of volume, we probably are looking closer to a $6 move, about 13%. Let's take a look at Mosaic. Mosaic has been in a downtrend and has bounced pretty aggressively, creating a higher low. But until I get through this channel high, even with the good volume, even with the very high volume, 150% volume, I want to get through 28 to get this pushed up to the next level. Southern Copper, SCCO, you can see is giving us a bull flag pattern. Hasn't quite broke out, so it's on my watch list. And if it does break through this high with any type of volume, I'm looking for 142, a huge move on this. Looking for about 26 points or about 15% on Southern Copper. Most of these are giving me about 10 to 15% targets. And we could get the same thing out of copper directly. So if we look at copper futures have created these bull flag type pattern. If this is the bounce and we run like we did before, I would be looking for a 15% move or a similar bounce that we saw through here, which went from $4 to $4.60, and we'd be looking for a 15% rally in copper prices. Now the stock that's kind of an outlier, that's not listed as basic materials, even though it is basic materials, is Corning. Corning gave us an amazing breakout with huge volume yesterday and has pulled back about half the candle to the previous resistance. A breakout retest on light volume is actually a decent signal. And if we're seeing the high volume breakout and low volume pullback, comparing the volume yesterday at 14.3 million to today's 4 million, that is almost 5 times as much. But we're looking at a massive breakout and a pullback. This could be an opportunity to trade this entire ascending triangle pattern, or even slightly consolidating candle or triangle, and I'd be looking for 38 up to 46. So we're looking at an $8 move, almost 20% move up on Corning. Now Corning again makes plastics, they make fiber optics, and so that's why they're listed in information technology. They provide industrial products to the technology world, and that's what I'd be looking at. Overall, if inflation is there, gold's going to continue to go higher. Gold's bounce and breakout here may be already established, and not only should we see a swing high up for another 5 points, which is about, what is that, about 20% there, or 2% there, but we could run this entire distance. So if this is a flag on gold, we could be looking from 230 up to 247. That's going to be a 17-point move, and really all of these are setting up for bounces and a continuation higher. If inflation's there, commodities go higher. If inflation's there, commodities go higher, and that could be weakness in the economy. It could be growth in the economy. In the end, we don't care if we're invested in those things that provide or create or value add the core basic materials. Now, keep in mind as well, as we go into tomorrow and into next week, it is earnings season launch, really. We have we had today Delta and Domino's, but starting tomorrow morning, we have the banks. The banks and the financials begin. JP Morgan, Wells Fargo, Bank of New York Mellon, certainly Fastenal there, but Bank of America, Goldman Sachs, BlackRock, Citigroup, PNC, all the way down. It is now earnings season, and there's a lot of questions in my mind as to how stable the banks really are and what they're doing or going to do with their unrealized losses. So it could be a very volatile week starting tomorrow morning and going all the way to next Friday. So be aware, be safe, and join us in the morning for Brandon and I as we go through our TheoTrade live in the morning as we set up the markets for those earnings in the beginning of this earnings season.